Alright, there's 3 movies this week. There are 2 that are noticeably missing. The first being Late Night, the Emma Thompson, Mindy Kaling movie that everybody's going crazy for, which I do plan on seeing next week, so it'll be on the following video, it should be. And I was also this week gonna do Always Be My Maybe, the Netflix movie that everybody's freaking out about also. But I'll probably put it on when I do the big, sort of cluster video in the next few days, so that'll be there. So in the meantime, we'll talk about these 3, starting with Men in Black International. The movie that just kind of... There are those movies that come along that are continuations or spin-offs or whatever you want to call them, that just kind of immediately don't seem like the best idea, mainly being the fact that you're going to try to do a Men in Black movie without Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. I guess even to an extent Josh Brolin. The only returning human character is Emma Thompson's O, who was introduced in Men in Black 3. An odd character of all the characters to bring back, but I guess Emma Thompson had an open schedule. So now we have new agents played by Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, with Tessa Thompson kind of being the Will Smith role, where she's the one that's on the outside and she kind of knows something's going on, but she's not quite sure, but she knows a lot more than Will Smith did going in, because she actually meets an alien in her opening scene without she misses the neuralizer that her parents get. So she carries this throughout. People think she's crazy, and then she eventually... They throw us into this plot where she figures out where they are and who they are by tracking this alien named Jimmy. But the trouble with that is that the movie just kind of drops the Jimmy storyline in there, and its only purpose, like the only time we ever see Jimmy, his only purpose is for her to find out what exactly it is that the Men in Black do, after having only witnessed them just a little bit in her childhood. And of course, in her childhood she meets the small alien that immediately makes you think, oh, there's something for marketing and merchandising, that's going to be the direction it goes. Same thing for Kumail Nanjiani's little alien that we'll talk about in a minute. But the thing about it was, going into this, and it probably also seemed like a bit underwhelming, not just because it doesn't have the main cast members, but also there's that thing that a lot of people seem to be on board with, that really weird direction they were going to go, supposedly, where it was like the Men in Black crossing over with 21 Jump Street thing, which of course fell through. That is something that almost seemed like it was too weird but kind of amazing at the same time to ever actually exist. So once it was dropped, it seems to have kind of morphed into this, where we do immediately go into the international aspect of the title, where it is an interesting concept to have, a globe-trotting Men in Black, to have them in places all around the world rather than just one city. So we do have a decent enough opening with Chris Hemsworth and Liam Neeson at the Eiffel Tower, and we get neuralizer jokes and all that stuff. We get a bit of an action scene, and then it's fine. Because going into this, I was wondering how it feels immediately, given the not-so-great reception it's been getting. And I do, once again, try to keep that stuff out of my head as much as I can going in, but it is one of those movies that just kind of had, this probably won't do very well critically written all over it, despite the fact that it's already an established property that people love, and you've got a cast that has already worked together to great effect, with Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson having been in Thor Ragnarok. So it seemed like there were plenty of things here that could make it work, even if it seemed like on paper maybe it wasn't a good idea to begin with. I will say right up front, to me anyway, it's not as bad as I think it's being built up to be. It's certainly not great. I really wouldn't even call it good. But more importantly, it's not as bad as you're probably hearing. Whatever that tells you. So obviously once she goes through the whole Jimmy thing, where she eventually meets Emma Thompson, and it really doesn't take long at all. She basically just has to say, I know who you guys are, and remember, I found you, so that means I'm good at something, one of the things you do, I guess. So they're like, alright, I guess you know too much. So instead of neuralizing you, we're just gonna hand some shit over to you, and we're gonna Will Smith you into this movie now. We're gonna give you a job that's kind of on the lower level, but it won't be long in the movie at all before you're right there with Hemsworth doing all the Men in Black shit. And so we do meet some villains. There's villains scattered everywhere, but the ones that get the most screen time are these twins, who are, they do seem pretty vicious when we see what they do to this dude, and the aftermath of him, but once again, we just had it with Captain Marvel, we just had it with Dark Phoenix, now once again we have the faceless alien villains that assume the form of a human before they wreak havoc. And in this case, it's two aliens taking the same form of one person, and then they're the ones basically causing all the destruction. And where a lot of the action scenes will take place. And there is some creativity here. They can, like, you know, bend the earth and all that, but there's also, like, they are trying to add, like, it seems like it would be, like, this is just going to have, like, a lot of lazy stuff, and it's going to be retreading and all that. They're not going to bring anything new to it. They do try to be creative, like there's new sort of, you know, Men in Black vehicles and weapons and modes of transportation and all that other stuff. But it does feel like, while you want to commend it for it going in the creative path as much as it can, it feels like it's a bit overbearing, like they're maybe trying to put a little too much into it, and it feels less like, oh, they're, you know, introducing all this new creative stuff in this world, and more just like, it just kind of becomes obnoxious and a bit too much. And to the point where there's maybe almost too much focus on it when there's everything else could be progressing in its own direction. But yeah, so I feel bad for like saying that's a criticism, because you kind of want them to build on that that kind of stuff as much as possible. But I guess it's just, I don't know. Maybe it didn't feel creative enough. It felt like they were doing a lot, but it didn't feel like it was expanding on much, I guess would be what it is. And speaking of not expanding on much, of course, Chris Hemsworth is our new lead. And wouldn't you guess, it feels like a good 75% of his screen time is devoted to the female characters making Chris Hemsworth his hot jokes. Of course. And going on his character also, when he's not just boiled down to that, there is this whole other thing they're trying to do with his character, where it's, apparently he's not the agent he used to be, but we only know this because people keep saying it. There's not really, because he seems to more or less do what he has to do. There's a scene towards the beginning when he's like at this alien poker game or whatever, and I guess he's undercover, but the aliens figure out immediately that he's Men in Black, and then an action scene happens. But I mean, he kills them all, and he seems pretty not too inept when doing that. But no, the movie just keeps telling us he's changed, he's so different now, he's not who he used to be. Liam Neeson saying, like, I thought you could run this place, and now I don't know. And it's like, I can't really tell what we're supposed to be seeing that tells us that about him. Because he seems perfectly competent as far as I can tell. His shirts don't button up all the way. That's about the most obvious character flaw they give him. He seems desperate, I think is what she says. So I don't know what all of that was about, but yeah, so obviously we're going to do the usual Men in Black thing, where they meet one alien, then that alien leads them to another alien, and so on. And Hemsworth may or may not have a past with most of them. Maybe one's like an ex-girlfriend, one is a friend of sorts. And then it's just that, and these are usually punctuated with action scenes, and that's pretty much what the middle is. So, to the movie's credit, it could have been boring, which it isn't. That probably could have been actually the worst thing. But there is, like, even if it's not that great, and it might seem a bit redundant, and it's not adding too much, there's like an energy to it that keeps it alive enough to where you won't hate it, I guess. But they also throw in stuff like the Kumail Nanjiani character, who is this dude that's like this big that just is basically their sidekick for the rest of the movie once he's introduced. And the problem with this is that, you know how, you notice when you look at the first three movies The one that typically gets shit on is the second movie. And you'll notice that when you look at 1, 2, and 3, there's something that 1 and 3 have in common that they don't have in common with 2. And that's the fact that 2 tried to put Frank on us as much as possible and give them, like, a funny sidekick. And you'll notice that 1 and 3 worked a lot better when it was just K and J working by themselves together. So I can see the pattern here. I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot more problems with these movies, but I mean, looking at the pattern, the ones that are critically acclaimed and generally well-liked by fans are the ones where they don't have a sidekick. But this movie apparently didn't want to go that route. They felt they absolutely needed the funny little sidekick voiced by Kumail Nanjiani basically doing his thing. So, and that's... And you can just imagine where that goes. So, way too much focus on that, way too much of them trying to make stupid comedy out of that. And then eventually it gets to the point where we've got a little turn in the story, where there is apparently a mole in the Men in Black. But the trouble with this is that there's not... I mean, I guess I don't want to outright spoil it, but I mean... if you look at what the movie has set up, they say, oh, there's a mole in the Men in Black, you've got to figure out who it is, or they're going to take over the world, or whatever. We've only been in, besides Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, we've only met, like, 3 other people in the Men in Black. So, there's the character, it's definitely not going to be to the point that we wouldn't even think that. The red herring, and who it actually is. But the only trouble is, especially with throwing in a red herring, is the fact that I don't know about anybody else, but as soon as they said there's a mole in the Men in Black, I just said one actor's name in my head. Just immediately. And nothing would pry me away from that, no matter how much they tried to make it look like it was another character. And, once again, I wouldn't want to give away the movie's secrets, but, so they really try to play that up also, especially giving you, like, a false ending, where they make it seem like everything's all great, and everybody's clapping, and everything's over, and then it's like, yeah, we know there's one big thing you haven't addressed yet, and I sense a reveal coming, and then just, it's like you count down to 5. They look at each other and they're like, something's not right here. Well, no shit, the whole mole thing that you almost forgot about. So, yeah, and there's breaks in the middle where it's like, this is another movie where the characters end up stranded in the middle of the desert. Once they took off in their thing and then they crashed into the desert and you could tell they're going to be stuck there because their vehicle's, like, stuck in the ground, it was occurring to me, oh yeah, I honestly sometimes forget just how much we've used the characters get stranded in the middle of the desert trope. And here it is again, in all of its glory. So, that slows everything down for a little bit, gets us to an almost 2-hour runtime that we probably really don't need. So, yeah. And, like, every now and then they throw in something that'll be like, hey, you know, just so you know, we're still Men in Black, remember? Like I said, Emma Thompson comes back from the 3rd movie. We get a glimpse, there's a cameo, I guess you want to call it, by the Worm guys. And there is, I'm pretty sure Men in Black 3 implied that Frank is dead now. But I guess Frank's species, still, there's one laying there that speaks like him for a second. But apart from that, that's what it is. So, yeah. So, like I said, it could have been a lot worse than it is. Probably not as bad as you might be thinking, or as bad as the critics might let on, but it's really not very good either. And, like I said, especially the beginning is just so damn jumbled. Because when we actually start off with the Eiffel Tower thing, and it's 2016, then we jump back 20 years and see young Tessa Thompson, then we jump now to present day, and there's, like, so much it's trying to do, but then it's also just trying to throw stories at us like Jimmy, as if we're supposed to already know what's going on when we don't at all. And that's just, yeah, and then once that's how it starts off, and then we go forward, and it goes in all those directions I said, it becomes pretty obvious. Like, once it gets, I guess even before it gets going, you can just see this movie You can just make a blueprint of this movie in your mind from, like, miles away before things happen. And then eventually it'll end in a place that you know exactly where that will be as well. So, yeah. So that doesn't sound very flattering, but I mean, it's not terrible or anything. So, there is that. But, maybe the reason I think Men in Black didn't seem that bad is because I saw Shaft first. So let's talk about Shaft now. If you recall, we started with Richard Roundtree, and I want to say 1971, which I reviewed a while back, and I love it. It's great. It was like pretty much the start of the whole blaxploitation thing. It is just pure 70s greatness with this iconic character and this iconic performance from Richard Roundtree. It's just great. I love it through and through. The sequels aren't as good and didn't quite recapture that magic, but they're still, like, right there in the center of this is the heart of what the whole blaxploitation genre is, with Shaft's big score and Shaft in Africa and all that. And then we fast forward to 2000 when John Singleton made the movie with Samuel L. Jackson, which I love. Like, if you haven't seen it recently, Singleton's movie is so good. I just watched it again the other day before I saw this. And it's so good. It's Jackson in, like, peak badass form, which for him is a high bar. You've got great villains in Jeffrey Wright and Christian Bale coming from two different directions. A really great story that meshes all these things together and creates, like, this awesome web. Great side characters like Busta Rhymes, all that. I love that movie. So, I was getting kind of hyped for this one, except for the fact that I thought it was a bit odd that this movie's existence just kind of appeared. I think they said it filmed, like, in January 2018, I think. But I had no idea it existed for, like, a really long time. Like, it had long since been filmed before I heard that this had happened. And it was like, so we're getting another Shaft movie, but it's Jackson, because Richard Roundtree is also in Singleton's movie, but it's just like a second, it's practically a cameo. But this is like them sort of teaming up. And it's like, okay, so what in the fuck happened, you ask? Because here's the thing, is I'm really glad that I looked up this movie's background before I went in. Otherwise, I think my head would have exploded, even though it still kind of did anyway. So you've got a Shaft movie to follow up the Gordon Parks movie with Richard Roundtree from 1971, which was just the ultimate in that sort of gritty genre. And then you've got Singleton's movie, which is definitely a Singleton movie, and it kind of stays in that sort of gritty world. And now I looked and saw that our director is Tim Story, whose name I recognized right away, and I could feel my heart sinking, my stomach dropped, just everything went south really fast at the sight of this guy's name. He might be a nice guy in real life, but let me lay down his resume for you. The one fluke in his resume appears to be Barbershop, which I do love, but you gotta remember, this is a Shaft movie. So when you look at Tim Story's lineup, you've got the Ride-Along movies, you've got the Fantastic Four movies with Jessica Alba, you've got the Think Like a Man movies, and you've got Taxi with Queen Latifah and Jimmy Fallon. The guy I mentioned that just made all those movies has been given a Shaft movie. And I was like, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is him going off. I think it said on IMDb that this is his first R-rated movie. So that's a start, I guess. But I don't know how the fuck they did it with Shaft. But if you know this dude's resume and you watch this movie, believe it or not, somehow he managed to make a Tim Story movie through and through with characters from Shaft. And the big problem here is the fact that our main focus, of course, and this, you would think they would have learned from this by now, because I'm trying to think of a time where there was a long-delayed sequel where they were like, oh, how about, since they're older now, the lead character is their kid? Isn't that... I mean, I don't even know what studios say to that. Like, who looks at that and think it's an appealing thing? Even Singleton's movie addressed this, because they did the whole thing where it's like, well, he's not... you first see it and you think, oh, maybe it's a remake, but then Richard Roundtree's in it and you're like, oh, are they doing the kid thing? And it's like, no, Shaft's his uncle. And it's like, you know what? If you went through the trouble of doing just that tiny deviation, maybe you've got something going on. They don't want to do the whole son picking up where the dad left off thing that's idiotic as fuck. So it's like, okay, they're uncle and nephew. And then it's just him. And like I said, it's Jackson in peak badass form, so he goes right along with it. Like, if you had said that was a remake and he was basically playing the same character Richard Roundtree did, it'd be totally believable. And great, and it would expand on it, and yeah. So, nope. This is the, hey, it's Shaft's kid thing. And this movie shows us exactly why that's not the thing you're supposed to do. And by the way, speaking of that, not only did this movie fuck itself over by doing the whole, oh, it's Shaft's kid thing, haha! When they do introduce Richard Roundtree in it, which, by the way, you know how Richard Roundtree is, like, all over the promotional stuff. They got him on the poster, all the advertisements and all that, and it's the whole, oh, the Shafts are teaming up, and, oh, by the way, it's the kid, too. No, this movie kicks itself in the balls even more, and, like, tries to shit on Singleton's movie by them going to Richard Roundtree's apartment, and then he, like, pulls guns on them, and the kid says, Grandpa? And then Jackson calls him Pop, and then it's like, wait a minute, you're fucking up the continuity of Singleton's movie here. And then I swear to God, the scene punctuates itself with Jackson looking at Richard Roundtree and saying, maybe you'll stop pretending to be my uncle now. It's like, are you fucking serious? You... Not only did you do the shitty thing of making Jackson's kid be the main person here, and he's trying to follow in his dad's footsteps, but you had to turn the one thing that Singleton's movie made sure it got away from this thing and say, oh, nope, we were totally doing that the whole time. He really is Roundtree's kid. So it's going out of its way to not just fuck up itself, but the other movies. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because this movie's bad from beginning to end, from the very beginning. Because, first off, it didn't surprise me at all to learn this is going straight to Netflix internationally. And it really wouldn't surprise me if it did that here, too. But nope, saw it in a theater last night, believe it or not. So, going in, we started in 1989, okay? And it's Jackson Shaft and Regina Hall, and they're arguing, and it's kind of funny. It looks, it has that sleek look to it, like, okay, this looks like it might have been in, Singleton's universe or something. And she's complaining because he's, they're supposed to be in a relationship, but he's going around with his community dick, as she calls it. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is adding up so far. And of course, he's got a baby in the backseat, which ends up being our main character, and there's like a shootout and all that. Prior to the whole baby thing, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm feeling it. So then we've got to get to 89 to present day. So they have this opening credit sequence where it's, like, going down the calendar. Where it's like, here's the kid growing up without Shaft and getting inappropriate gifts from him whenever a holiday comes up. Barely hearing from him, and it's like, here's what Shaft was doing from time to time. And then, sure enough, 2000 comes around, and we see clips from Singleton's movie. So this is when it started to lose me. So it goes on, we see more stuff, we see what happened in history around those times and all that, and we see Singleton's movie pop up in 2000. Then we get all the way down to 2009, and in 2009, to represent 2009, they show us a chase scene from Singleton's movie. So this movie's not even aware of its own fucking timeline before the credits are over. And honestly, and I don't want to get, like, completely down to it, but I mean, just thinking about the fact of... And by the way, it's also weird to me that we're trying to do the whole Shaft family thing. Even doing the whole confusing thing where all 3 movies are called Shaft, all 3 characters are called John Shaft. But just to make it the whole thing. But it was kind of weird to me that if we're going to do a whole timeline thing, that we start in 1989, and then it's like, hey, we're going from 1989 to all this, and it's like, well, that's great, but what about the 70s? I mean, if we're going to bring it all together, should we not be capturing that too? But no, this movie has weird other plans up its sleeve. This movie is so completely and totally discombobulated and fucked up that I swear to God, one of the opening scenes is the youngest Shaft talking to his friend on the phone, and there's a siren in the background, and this is for no purpose, by the way. Like, it's not leading to anything. Maybe to show he's in a bad part of town or something. But as he's talking, there is a siren, okay? And the guy says, like, Shaft says, like, you know, hey, what's that in the background? It's so loud. And the guy's like, oh, that's just an ambulance. And we see an ambulance drive by behind him with its lights on. The trouble is this sound we've been hearing is so blatantly a fire truck siren. So, when this movie's not getting its dates right or its sound effects right. 5 minutes in. But if you think that's nitpicky, I'll talk about the rest of the movie. Just to see if this might be an omen to what we're in for. So, we go in, and Shaft works with the cops, and his boss is Titus Welliver, and we've got and of course the boss is that real sort of type where it's like, he addresses Shaft by saying, listen here, rookie. I swear to God, that's the dialogue. He gets worse dialogue than when he said, my face is my warrant, in whichever Transformers movie that was. And then in these police station scenes, it's that, if you've seen, especially Tim Story's movies, okay, so you gotta understand, you're comparing, this is in the same world as both the Gordon Parks Shaft movie and Singleton's Shaft movie. And now we've got that, surely you must know exactly what I'm talking about. Surely you've seen enough generic-ass movies like the ones Tim Story makes, like Ride Along and all that shit, where everything has, like, the aesthetic of a TV sitcom, and it's got that really generic music. Do you know what I'm talking about? And this is a fucking Shaft movie. What are they trying to capture here? Like, who decided to make this movie, let alone make it like this? It is just absolutely baffling when it hasn't even been on for 10 minutes. And that keeps going. And so, and that's the thing too, is by the time Jackson finally comes into it, you kind of wonder what kind of character he's going to be now, because we had Richard Roundtree in the 70s, and then in Singleton's movie, when after he's had an interaction with Roundtree, and Roundtree leaves, Jackson says, like, you know, God, he's gotten so cynical. And it's like, so is that going to be what Jackson is now? Well, I think that's what they were going for, but they went, like, way sort of off in the deep end and in the wrong direction by turning this into a Kids These Days movie, where it's basically Shaft trying to do every politically incorrect thing possible. And the problem with this is, I know you're gonna have people that are like, they think it's making like a caricature out of people who are like that, or you're gonna have the people who think it's like just legitimately like offensive. But the problem I have with either of these is that I really can't tell if the people who made the movie genuinely have the Kids These Days feeling, or if it's trying to make fun of that. I honestly can't even tell. It's like, because it's going into parody with how politically incorrect Shaft is trying to be. Jackson's Shaft. So I don't even know how to, like, after a while I just started not even paying attention to that stuff, because it's like, I'm not even sure what they're trying to say with it. Like, if that's their actual position, or if they're being so over the top with it because it's parody of that. I can't tell, and honestly, it's not even worth trying to figure out, because there's so many other problems wrong with this movie. So, once we get into all that, we first meet Jackson's character way late. It felt way too long, maybe like a half an hour or something. And so you think about, Shaft's theme song, the theme from Shaft that won Isaac Hayes an Oscar back then. And you think about the fact that that's what Shaft does as far as women are concerned. Where, like, Richard Roundtree was like, hey, man, I'm gonna go get laid. And then his next line after the fact is, hey, I got laid. And that's his thing. And then the same thing with Jackson, where Jackson does the, it's my duty to please that booty line. And this now introduces us to show us that Shaft is still that character. His son goes to the door, and this woman answers it, who's wearing nothing but a jacket. And we're like, oh, so I guess Shaft has been busy. But to show us that Shaft has been busy, when he's face to face with his son, he has, we'll say, evidence on his face that he has been busy with this woman. And that felt like a fucking Farrelly Brothers joke. It's like you took one of Shaft's big personality traits of he loves women and women love him, and you turn that into what accounts to basically a Farrelly Brothers joke. Like a really low-brow Farrelly Brothers joke. Not even, like, clever to the extent of Cameron Diaz putting, cum in her hair. Less than that. So that's how we're introducing the characters now. And then it tries to get him back into badass mode, and I guess for the most part, when the time calls for it, obviously Jackson is game for this, but it's because the thing here is that when Singleton's movie ended, after he threw his badge at the wall and all that, and the woman came in with the black eye, and she was like, hey, I'm getting abused by my boyfriend and stuff like that, and it basically implies that Shaft is going to be the equalizer now. And it's like, if that had just been the sequel by itself, just Samuel Jackson Shaft being the equalizer, and eventually bringing Richard Roundtree into it, I think we would have had a movie here. And bring in a capable director. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure you could have made something out of that. But to willingly take the approach of, hey, we're going to make a wacky comedy. Yeah, the movie's a comedy, but still a comedy, about, oh, this is Shaft's kid, but he's in over his head, he's kind of a wimp, he doesn't like guns, haha, and he's got a whole side story going on with the girl that he likes, but it's not like that. And that's what a lot of the movie is his bullshit. And this is a character that is not appealing in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. He wouldn't be in his own movie, let alone the fact that this is supposed to be a Shaft movie. I can't express that enough. And yeah, but he's the main focus, so that's what we get. And we get this really stupid plot with these stupid villains. And there's like a side villain here. There's a main villain that actually feels like he's in a Shaft movie. Only trouble is he has like a minute and a half of screen time. The rest of it is these dumb fucks running around. And it's all in this, yeah. So they throw in stupid jokes. Like, they bring out Jackson basically breaks the fourth wall to make another Lawrence Fishburne joke. And then there's the whole thing where by the way, there is a dance fight in this movie. We got a Shaft movie with a dance fight in it. From the director of Queen Latifah's Taxi. I don't know. Apart from to just say the details, I don't know how else you can express disdain for something like that. But there it is. And there's some things that you kind of hope they'll bring back, like, I feel like the Busta Rhymes character you could have brought back in some way, or not, whatever. We have to devote our time to other stuff, like, I think his would-be girlfriend is supposed to be like a contrast to the whole un-PC thing they're trying to do with Shaft. But they just both come off equally obnoxious. They accomplish nothing. It just meets in the middle and nobody gives a fuck. And it's like, what's this shit doing in a Shaft movie anyway? Why is it... from either side. Doesn't matter. I don't... But there's also, and it also seems like it just totally sidetracks itself way too many times. Like, I'm talking about how we go off the whole kid thing is basically the main character. Then we got his whole would-be girlfriend thing. Then there's the whole thing between him and Regina Hall, and it's like, are they gonna rekindle something or are they not? So he goes and he like ruins her date. And it becomes a fucking romantic comedy, and then that leads to Regina Hall going into the bathroom at the restaurant and doing a whole scene in a mirror that basically, if you were to walk in on this movie, you would assume this was a romantic comedy that Regina Hall was the star of, despite the fact that she's in this movie for like 5 or 10 minutes. But this scene has just gone so completely off the fucking rails, like pretty much every scene in the movie. And it's... yeah. So, really the only time there's any magic whatsoever, predictably, would be when Richard Roundtree finally finds his way into the last 10 minutes of the movie. And so they even do the thing where, like, not only is it magic to see him, like, we'll pretend the fucking kid's not there. Because all he's doing is bumbling around making fucking jokes anyway, going, oh, you guys are so cool and I'm so not. That whole fucking thing. But if you just ignore that shit, the ending is magic. Watching Richard Roundtree and Samuel Jackson both playing Shafts fucking people up. Pure magic, especially when you actually get the moment where, I mean, it's cut to shit, so you can tell that Richard Roundtree hardly had to do any action himself, because he's getting up there in age, obviously. But we do have the moment where he comes through on the rope, through the window, like the climax of the original movie, and it is, even if it's so obviously a stunt double, and so obviously cut to make sure his face is not in the shot. I mean, the fact that they went that route to make that character do that was like, this is what I came here for. I came here to see that shot of Richard Roundtree swinging in through a window, regardless of his age. I don't care if it's a stunt double or not. The fact that they even went there, I applaud, and that's what we came here for. That's what we wanted. Even if they punctuate it with the joke of Roundtree goes through the window, Jackson goes through the window. Oh, the kid can't break through the window, so he's hanging outside while this is going on, going, hey guys, help me. It's really disheartening that that character exists. It's really a fucking bummer. And that's what most of the movie is. Like, you might be left on a high because the Richard Roundtree stuff's at the end, and Jackson gets to kind of do his whole thing, too. Jackson gets his badass moment with the villain and all that. But you gotta remember that 90% of this movie was that kid fucking bumbling around like a fucking idiot, just ruining the name of Shaft with every breath he took. So, yeah, like, even when he's in the same shot as Richard Roundtree and Samuel Jackson, he is ruining Shaft. That's how I feel about this character. That's really hard to do. So let alone when you have free reign when most of the movie's about him to completely fuck this up. I don't... God, I hope the guy who plays the youngest Shaft never sees this. Because then I'd feel really bad for him as a human being, but I mean, this is just... Who the fuck okayed this? What the fuck was the studio thinking with this shit? This is just absolute bullshit. So, that's what that is. So, let's go on to our last movie, which is The Dead Don't Die. A movie I was extremely excited for. I've mentioned many times on these videos how much I love Jim Jarmusch. Specifically, when I reviewed Patterson when it came out. Just his whole filmography, like I said, he's one of the best directors to, like, marathon. So it's like, you just feel like you're hanging out with, like, these, you know, cool people all day, and these characters that just don't really give a fuck about anything, and... You know, everything from Night on Earth, Down by Law, to Mystery Train is really damn good. Coffee and Cigarettes. And this is kind of like... I feel like when you watch something like Dead Man or something like that, where it's still definitely him, but it's got a bit more of a narrative. Something like that and something like The Dead Don't Die. Even though I do think this goes in some interesting directions... I do much prefer meandering dramas where the characters are just kind of doing their thing and there's not really much of a narrative. I think that's the best Jarmusch easily. Broken Flowers had a pretty clear narrative also. And this one obviously is going to be a zombie movie. But the thing about that was the reason I was hyped for it was I wasn't quite sure exactly how much of a zombie movie it was going to be. Like, I was kind of hoping it wouldn't be too traditional after we saw Jarmusch tackle vampires with only lovers left alive. And I love that he took vampires, but he so completely made a Jim Jarmusch movie. Where it was like, well, we're immortal, we've done everything there is to do, now we just gotta kind of sit around and chill. And just see what happens. And it's like, that's so perfect. And I was kind of wondering if he was going to be able to kind of do that same thing with zombies. I'm not quite sure how, but that's what had me so amped up, is like, what is he going to do? So I guess you could say right up front I'm a little disappointed in this movie. But there's still certain things I really like about it. And he definitely took some of his very own directions in it. So there's nothing I particularly dislike about this movie. There's just like, this is the kind of stuff I came here for, and it's like, oh well, I kind of thought you'd do more with this, but okay, or less. That's what I should probably say. I thought you were gonna do less with this, but yeah, it's. Well, the thing here is, we start off with these cops who are Bill Murray and Adam Driver, and they're going out to investigate a hermit who's causing trouble, played by Tom Waits, and the person complaining about Tom Waits is a farmer played by Steve Buscemi. And it's like, just right then, you just hear those four names together in a Jarmusch movie, and in this setup, and it's like, this just feels so glorious. The opening credits, where there's nothing special to them, they just show the names, and it's like, just as you're watching the cast list go by, you're like, oh my god, I can't wait for the rest of this. And it's okay, I guess. Especially when it feels like the cast just kind of never stops, and it's all these names that you love so much. But obviously there's the whole thing where it's eventually leading to them slowly realizing that there's like an apocalypse happening. Something about the Earth being off its axis, and the dead are rising, and they gravitate towards the things that they did when they were alive. Like there's an Iggy Pop zombie, because of course, that's obsessed with coffee. And a Sarah Driver, I believe her name, who is Jim Jarmusch's partner in real life, who I don't believe is related to Adam in any way, as far as I know. And so, yeah, so we feel like we've got this embarrassment of riches, looking at this setup with this cast, and Jarmusch's name on it. So we do get some stuff at the beginning where it's being weirdly meta. Like, it's almost being nonchalantly meta. When one of the first scenes of the movie is Bill Murray and Adam Driver driving down the road, and The Dead Don't Die is playing on the radio. And Murray's like, what is this? Why does it sound so familiar? And Adam Driver says, it's the theme song. And that's all he says. It's like, that is like, I'm assuming he means the theme song of the movie? It's like, okay, that's unexpected to break the fourth wall in the first 5 minutes, but alright. And then after that, the movie's just normal. It's just basically a normal zombie movie. The thing that's most Jarmusch about it is the fact that as it's happening, they're just so, like nobody really loses their cool for a long time. There's just, like, when they realize that, graves have been busted through when they're going through the cemetery, Adam Driver just kind of looks around and he's like, oh man, this isn't going to end well. And it's just like that, like they're just reacting to it just really quietly. It is very Shaun of the Dead, for sure. And it does kind of make you feel like maybe it's something that's been tackled enough because of the jokes in Shaun of the Dead. But Jarmusch will always kind of have his own thing going on. So even with that, it was like, okay, let's see what else he has up his sleeve. Because he's got stuff up his sleeve. And I don't want to say too much about that stuff. But it goes in some very interesting... Like, it's worth... Even if it seems like it's, a regular zombie movie only really downplayed, but it kind of seems like it's hitting the same beats anyway, it's worth sticking with just to see where it's going to go. And this cast will keep you there anyway. We've also got, like, Danny Glover in here, Caleb Landry Jones, a whole lot of RZA, just a lot of people popping in and out. Selena Gomez and her whole crew, her hipsters, her wannabe hipsters. Because they keep calling them hipsters, but at the same time, I almost want to feel like it's Jarmusch, like, making fun of them in a way where it's, Caleb Landry Jones works at, like, this memorabilia place, that's got, like, horror movie stuff everywhere, and he's wearing a Nosferatu shirt. He makes a Psycho reference, and he makes a Romero reference, which are very obvious, horror references to make. They're, like, the biggest things in it. But as Selena Gomez is leaving, she's like, "Your horror knowledge is very impressive." It's like it's almost like they're. It's almost like she's intentionally like a wannabe hipster as opposed to an actual hipster in a way. To where otherwise she'd be bitching him out that his knowledge isn't obscure enough or something. So there's that kind of stuff going on. Then there's just some visual stuff where it's like there are these kids at a detention center that we focus on for a reason I'm not really sure of, come to think of it, after I've seen the whole thing. But they're like sitting in these chairs watching the news, and the chairs kind of look like tombstones. And then there is Rosie Perez is in it as a reporter, and her name is Posey Juarez, which is like ridiculous, hilariously close to her real name. I'm guessing that's a joke also. Then you have recognizable faces like Carol Kane is here to just play a corpse. Oscar-nominated Carol Kane is here to play a corpse. And stuff like that. And then you've got Tilda Swinton, who is a funeral director or an undertaker who practices in, like, samurai ways. Like, she has a sword and does this whole thing when she's not tending to bodies directly in the other room. There's definitely a weirdness here where it's Jarmusch just doing whatever the hell he wants. Like, seemingly whatever comes to his mind in the moment. And then you've got stuff like them talking about, I guess, throwing politics into it. But the thing is, you can't necessarily tell what exactly it is they're trying to say politically, if anything at all. Because you've got Buscemi's character, who's got, of course, you know, one of the red hats. And he's got a dog named Rumsfeld. And it's like, is he representing a certain something here politically? It's hard to tell, because the movie's just got so many other characters and things going on also. So it's one of those cases where if it's... Because we've got this whole thing where it's like, if it's going up against, like, anti-intellectualism, possibly, because there's the whole thing where there's the person that says, they're talking about Ella Fitzgerald, and then it's like, oh, that's, Gatsby's wife. And then by Gatsby they say, the Robert Redford guy. And it's like, I feel like it's not just him writing a dumb character. It's almost like it's him sort of, like, attacking, anti-intellectualism or something like that. So that's probably in there somewhere. But in the meantime, you do have this zombie thing going on where it does look very low budget. Like, instead of bleeding, like, this very CGI black smoke comes out of them, like, when their heads get cut off and all that. And it's... Yeah, so that's basically what it is, and then they just sort of jump around from the character to the character, and it's, like I said, they have fun with the no panic thing for a while there, but it's still, like, I still feel like there's too much going on for a Jarmusch movie. Like, it feels like it's him stepping away from himself maybe a little too much. Until the ending comes along, and then the ending's one of those cases where it was like, well... alright, but then, like, the more I think about it, the more I like it, because the more it seemed like he was intentionally going and, like, still doing his own thing, but still in kind of an obvious direction, but then he just kind of completely, just completely hits us out of nowhere with this ending that just goes in all the possible deep-end ways that it can, just basically seemingly because it can. And see, that's what I like about Jarmusch. It's doing stuff because you can. Whether it's big or small or whatever. Whether you want to have the characters do... Like The Limits of Control is a movie I appreciate. Because it's literally just a whole movie of a character doing jack shit until the ending is, oh, he kills somebody. And that's what he was building to do this whole time. And it's like, he has a way of making the ending make up for everything. And make everything sort of make sense. And you would suddenly understand the whole mundane thing. Or you can just love his characters, and this has that going on. And then this ending where there's just an exchange that is so... I just want to... Without just saying straight up what it is, which is what I'm so desperately wanting to do right now, it's basically like, if you know the actors, like, outside of their movie, one actor in particular, and the way that he works... And the way that finds its way into this movie, let's put it this way. This is a movie written and directed by a guy that knows Bill Murray very well. That's basically the best I can say. So, yeah, and then it's like... And then, after a while, the final thing is just Tom Waits, like, making obvious commentary about the whole situation and how this relates to real life and how it's symbolic and metaphorical and all that. But the thing about it is, with Jarmusch, I cannot tell, and I kind of like this, is that I can't tell if that Waits scene and his dialogue is social commentary or satire of social commentary. I feel like it could be either one, honestly. Like, it feels like way too blatant and obvious for it to be something that Jarmusch wanted to say. So I almost want to take it as it was a satire of social commentary. Which would be totally believable given the directions this goes. So, yeah. So basically, I am a bit disappointed, but I mainly feel that way because I feel like the middle could have benefited from being even more mundane. Like, played more on the fact that, like, they're not panicking about this. They're just so, like, well, this is the way it is, and this isn't going to be very good, but, you know, I guess we'll do what we can when we cross that bridge. So, yeah, with more of that, it probably would have been more of the movie I was really hoping it was, but, I mean... You see Jarmusch's name, you see this cast list, and the fact that these are going to somehow come together for a zombie movie. It was going to be pretty hard to reach those expectations, but like I said, something more like Only Lovers Left Alive, I think, would have been more interesting to see. But like I said, if you want interesting, he certainly took some dives in the ending just to see, you know, where the hell he'd end up, and yeah, so it's definitely worth seeing, especially if you're a Jarmusch fan. But if you're too much of a Jarmusch fan, you might be a little disappointed. But at least in most of it. So, yeah. So that's what that is. So, as I said, I will be seeing Late Night on Tuesday, and then that'll go into, I think, Toy Story's following week and Child's Play. Things might get a little shifted schedule-wise, so I don't know what's all going on in there. But something will happen. And so, yeah, so we have more verses coming and all that stuff. I'm going to finally finish that Twilight Zone thing, just for the sake of completion. Big Little Lies is on Sunday again, so all that. All the stuff that we've been doing. So, until all that stuff, that's it.